What if $5,000 in your bank account today could mean more to your future than a billionaire's first billion? Sounds outrageous, I know. But hear me out. Small money, when used the right way, is a strategic weapon. It turns constraints into advantage. It lets you access opportunities the giants can't touch. It forces discipline, focus, and a kind of thinking that, over time, creates a symmetry. Scenarios where you can lose a little but stand to gain a lot. A few months ago, a 25-year-old Uber driver sat across from me. He had scraped together a few $1,000s from nights and weekends, tips, and frugal living. He asked a simple question. Is it worth investing this now, or should I wait until I have more? I could have given him the usual advice: index funds, dollar cost averaging, diversify, sleep well. Instead, I told him something sharper. Your size is a superpower if you learn to use it. Use it poorly, and you're right back to square one. Use it well, and a handful of asymmetric wins can change everything. I'll show you 3 principles that make that possible, and a 5-step plan you can start this week. If this is speaking to you, comment below with your city and how much you have to invest. I want to see where the small advantages are hiding. Before we begin, a short, clear note. The stories and examples I'll use are historical and illustrative, not guarantees. These are principles and case studies, not personalized financial advice. Do your homework and consider consulting a professional for choices specific to your situation. First principle, small cap advantage. When you're small, you can go places big funds simply can't go. Think of a neighborhood hardware store, a parking lot owner with a handful of spaces, a laundromat on a main street, or a tiny oil royalty that paid pennies per month for years. Large institutional investors have to manage billions. They need liquidity, the ability to buy and sell massive positions without moving the market. They have mandates, committees, compliance departments, and investors who panic at the first downturn. That makes them slow and blunt. You, with your few thousand or a few dozen thousand, can be nimble. You can research a local business, buy a controlling slice of a tiny company, or underwrite a private deal that never appears on a public screen. To make this concrete, imagine a small petroleum royalty that cost someone $1,000 decades ago. For a long time it paid almost nothing. Then a discovery, a reworking, or a change in commodity prices turned that $1,000 into something that paid significantly more than a saver could expect from traditional approaches. Or consider a laundromat bought by someone who understood the local rent dynamics and maintenance costs. A few years of steady profits and reinvestment can convert a modest initial price into a real income engine. These aren't certainties, but they are examples of mispricings and niche opportunities that large money often ignores. That's the small cap advantage. Access to opportunities with asymmetry, small downside, outsized upside, that institutions either can't or won't pursue. Little technical definitions to keep things honest. Liquidity means how quickly and cheaply you can sell an investment. As an individual with small capital, you can accept illiquidity that would be unacceptable to a giant fund. Asymmetry means a situation where your downside is limited, but the upside is large. The classic lose small, win big setup. These are the kinds of edges you should hunt. Second principle, concentration with conviction. Conventional advice screams, Diversify, as if spreading every dollar across every option is the moral high ground. That's comfortable advice for the masses and for managers who must appear prudent. But diversification is not an end in itself. It's a tool for reducing idiosyncratic risk, not a strategy for maximizing concentrated returns. If you want to unlock real wealth, learn a small number of things deeply and bet on them. Let me be clear. Concentration is not reckless. It requires mastery. It requires that you understand, in a way that goes beyond surface-level data, the economics and risks of what you own. Imagine two investors. One invests 2% of his money in 50 different small opportunities. His winners have to be enormous to matter. The other studies one niche for a year, finds a mispriced laundromat or a niche supplier with stable cash flows, and places 25 to 50% of his capital behind that conviction. If his research is right, his concentrated position can compound into something life-changing. If he's wrong and he didn't do the work, he can lose a meaningful part of his capital. That's why I emphasize conviction tied to mastery. History gives us a useful counterexample. In 1964, when American Express faced its own crisis, a few contrarian investors made concentrated bets based on understanding the business and its long-term franchise value. Those who had deep conviction and were willing to concentrate reaped enormous rewards over the long term. I don't tell that story to suggest a specific outcome is guaranteed. I tell it to illustrate the payoff of concentrated conviction when grounded in real understanding. A short math example to make the point visceral. Suppose you have $5,000. If you spread it thin into 25 different tiny bets of $200 each, you need a lot of big winners to become meaningful. If one of those $200 bets returns 10x, you still only add one $800 net after accounting for losses. Not transformative. But if instead you place $2,500 into one well-understood opportunity and it returns 5x over several years, you now have $12,500. A step change. That's the power of concentration with care. Third principle, patience, reinvestment, and asymmetry. Real wealth rarely appears as a smooth line of consistent 9% returns. It appears when you are positioned to capture the rare asymmetric event, a 3x, 5x, or 10x outcome that reshapes your portfolio. That requires patience, the willingness to hold for years, not quarters, and the discipline to reinvest profits aggressively while you are still small. Think of the math professor I knew, someone who earned a modest academic salary but had a knack for recognizing undervalued niches in small industrial firms. He didn't chase market glamour. He read annual reports like novels. He kept a modest lifestyle, funneled savings into concentrated, asymmetric opportunities, and let time and compounding do the rest. Over decades, those choices turned into far more than a comfortable retirement. They produced real financial independence. The mechanism was simple. Small amounts invested into the right asymmetries and held long enough to compound. Consider the numerical contrast. A steady 12% annual return from a diversified portfolio is excellent over time, but it's linear relative to big asymmetrical wins. If you find a few opportunities that multiply 5-fold or 10-fold, even if they are infrequent, the net effect dwarfs the benefits of steady single-digit returns. That's why reinvestment matters. When you realize a gain, redeploy it into the next carefully selected asymmetric chance rather than spreading it thin. Now, 7 practical cautions about risk. First, define risk properly. Risk is not day-to-day price swings. That's volatility. Risk is the permanent loss of capital. Investments that never recover their original value because of structural damage to the business, fraud, regulatory shock, or catastrophic misjudgment. Always ask yourself, if I'm wrong, how much could I truly lose? Could this company's cash flows survive a severe downturn, or am I betting on hope? Second, concentration increases the impact of being wrong, so your research standards must be higher. Third, liquidity risk. Many small asymmetric opportunities are illiquid. That is acceptable if you don't need the money for 5 to 10 years. Fourth, avoid sophistication theater. Complicated models and exotic products rarely compensate for ignorance. Fifth, don't let ego drive you. The need to be right collapses when you're trying to prove yourself. Sixth, never, ever use illegal or unethical methods to get an edge. Seventh, be ready to change your mind quickly when new evidence arrives. Conviction without flexibility is dogma, not strategy. Let me give you a set of concrete, real-world examples to clarify how these principles translate into action. A laundromat owner buys a worn-down store in a neighborhood where laundry habits are stable and rents are reasonable. He knows the appliance market, has relationships with repair technicians, and understands local foot traffic. By improving machines, adding token efficiency, and optimizing hours, the owner turns a barely profitable shop into steady cash flow. That cash flow can be used to pay down debt, reinvest in appliances, and eventually buy a second location. Reinvested small wins like this accumulate. A retired founder of a small manufacturing business wanted to sell. Institutional buyers offered lowball valuations because the company was tiny and idiosyncratic. A local purchaser who understood the customer relationships and the cost structure paid a fair price, took over operations, and realized better margins by cutting redundant overhead and improving supplier terms. The founder got his exit. The buyer created value in a way that larger buyers couldn't. A parking lot investor in a Midwestern town bought several small lots for cash when prices were low. He tightened operations, negotiated leases with nearby businesses, and slowly increased revenues. Parking lots are mundane, but they are cash-focused and often undervalued. Over time, those modest payments can be much more valuable to a small investor than fancy public stock picks. And the petroleum royalty example is instructive too. Someone bought a tiny interest in a well for about $1,000 in an era when the well produced little. Decades later, with technology changes and better extraction, that royalty's present value climbed in a way no one at the time expected. The key lesson, owning a slice of something productive, even a tiny slice, can be life-changing when circumstances tilt in your favor. If these examples feel like luck, note this. Luck helps, but preparation makes you lucky. You increase your odds by knowing where to look and by being patient enough to capture the event when it appears. So, what do you do tomorrow? Here's a 5-step plan to use while you're still small, drawn from these principles. Each step I'll explain with a 1-sentence example so you can picture it. 1. Choose a very narrow niche you can dominate. Example, instead of I'll invest in small businesses, decide I'll focus on independent laundromats within a 20-mile radius of my city. 2. Study that niche deeply for at least 12 months. Example, visit 10 laundromats, talk to owners, learn machine maintenance costs, and track peak hours and pricing. 3. Wait for a near-perfect opportunity, a chance where price and circumstance create asymmetry. Example, when an owner needs cash fast because of health reasons, you can negotiate favorable terms that reflect both risk and the upside you see. 4. Allocate a concentrated portion of your capital, something meaningful, often 25 to 50%, when you have deep conviction. Example, rather than spending 10% across many deals, commit $10,000 of a $40,000 portfolio to one laundromat takeover when your due diligence supports it. 5. Hold patiently and reinvest profits aggressively while you're still small. Example, use the laundromat's earnings to pay down any acquisition debt and to save for a second site, rather than spending them on lifestyle inflation. Those 5 steps are simple to say and harder to execute. That's the point. They require discipline and patience. The 12-month study period is not busy work. It's necessary to separate superficial ideas from real advantages. Now, a few tactical tips that matter at the human level. First, silence is a tool. Turn down the noise. Social feeds, daily market coverage, and hot takes condition you to action. Your job is to think long-term. Second, pick your circle. Spend time with people who read, who ask hard questions, and who value independent thinking over status signaling. Third, do ground-level research. Walk the neighborhoods, talk to owners, look at lease terms. Screens and data are useful, but ground-level intelligence is where small investors find real mispricings. Fourth, err cheaply. Use small experiments to test assumptions before committing big capital. Fifth, keep records of what you learn. The best investors I know have journals of notes, mistakes, and interviews. Sixth, set a living standard that prioritizes reinvestment in your early phase. Living modestly for a decade to allocate capital to asymmetric bets is a tough choice, but it compounds. Another important point, adaptiveness. Small investors have an agility that institutions lack. Use it. If a thesis breaks down, cut losses and move on. One of the worst mistakes is non-action. The second worst is action that's driven by pride. Be quick to admit errors and quicker to pivot. Let's talk allocation and how much to risk. The 5-step plan recommends a concentrated allocation, often 25 to 50%, but that is conditional. You should only allocate that much when you have truly done the work and can honestly answer the risk questions. Do I understand the downside? Can I tolerate illiquidity? Do I have enough capital left to survive a prolonged loss or to take advantage of other opportunities? There's no one-size-fits-all number. The principle is commit enough capital that a real outcome matters to you, but not so much that a single mistake is catastrophic to your life. I want to return to psychology for a moment because money decisions are first made with the mind. Avoid the sophistication trap, the temptation to use fancy language and elaborate models to mask shallow understanding. If you can't explain your idea simply to someone in a diner, you probably don't understand it. Likewise, guard against social pressure. Friends who tout diversification as moral virtue or who mock concentration can be well-meaning and wrong for your situation. Be humble, not timid. Also, watch out for comparison bias. Tracking a billionaire's portfolio or a flashy trader on social media will do you no good. Their scale and constraints are different. Your job is to use your small size to find niche advantages they can't reach. Think like a specialist, not a generalist. Now, the anticipated question: how often will this work? How many times will you hit a 5X? The honest answer is not often. You will make mistakes. Some concentrated bets will lose. That's why each bet must be based on an asymmetric setup, limited permanent downside and meaningful upside. If you accept that you will be wrong sometimes, the few times you are right can make up for many small failures. That's how compounding works. Occasional outsized winners reshape outcomes. A simple back-of-the-envelope example to keep in mind. Suppose you make 10 concentrated bets of equal size over your early investing life. If 6 lose half and 3 are flat, but one returns 10 and X, your net result could be transformative. The key is designing the bets so that the upside far outweighs the downside. That design comes from domain knowledge, timing, and patience. Let me offer 3 short practical exercises you can do this month to begin building these habits. First, pick a niche and write a 1-page thesis. What you will study, why it might contain asymmetric opportunities, and who you should talk to. Second, schedule at least 5 ground-level interviews, owners, managers, suppliers, in that niche, and take notes. Third, set a capital plan. How much you will set aside each month for potential concentrated opportunities, and how much you will keep as dry powder for when the rare chance appears. These actions are where theory becomes practice. One more cautionary story. I met someone who tried to be everything at once. He spread money across public microcaps, private deals, collectibles, and crypto tokens without depth in any area. He mistook activity for skill. Years later, he had many positions but few convictions and little net progress. Contrast that with someone who focused on a single local niche, became the small expert in town, and built several compounding engines from modest starting points. The second path is slower to start, but far more likely to produce lasting wealth. So, where does that leave you? Being small is not a handicap. It's an option. Use it to be nimble, to do ground-level work, to concentrate where you understand the risk and potential. Embrace the delay required by patience and reinvest your wins while the base is still small. Life will give you noise and social pressure and the siren call of instant diversification. Ignore them. Commit to your niche for a full 12 months of study. If after that time you can find a real asymmetry and your math makes sense, move decisively with a meaningful allocation. To close, I'll be blunt. Most people treat small capital as a problem to be solved by mimicry. Do what the masses do, and you get mass results. If you want uncommon outcomes, embrace uncommon behavior. Choose a narrow lane. Learn it until you know it better than anyone you can find. Wait for price to create opportunity. Concentrate with humility and patience. Reinvest aggressively. Use your smallness like a scalpel, not like a blunt instrument. If you're ready to start, comment below with your city and how much you can invest today. I'll read a few answers, and the community will see what kinds of niches are nearby. If you want a short, practical checklist that summarizes the 5-step plan and the niche checklist, download the 1-page guide in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you want more case studies and step-by-step examples of how this thinking applies in laundromats, hardware stores, small manufacturing, and local royalties. This material is drawn from historical examples, personal experience, and principles associated with veteran investors who thought in terms of asymmetry and conviction. It isn't a guarantee, and it's not personalized financial advice. Be small, be thoughtful, and let time do its work. Unlocking wealth is not about magic numbers. It's about playing the game few are willing to play. Focused study, concentrated action, and patient reinvestment. Start today.